Stan in Philadelphia. And what's written here in the description is, what is the value of coming out as an atheist? And I think our answers are going to be very different on this. So, Stan, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, I can.
What's going on, man?
Okay, yeah. So I've called before. So how you doing again, Dan?
Doing great. Thanks, Stan. Thanks for asking. What a nice... You know, not all my callers ask me how I'm doing, and I really appreciate that, Stan. So,
and Rachel, I subscribe to viewers, and I've been a big fan for a while. So you've been doing great work.
Oh, thank you so much. That's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. I really liked your anti-vax video. I thought that was fantastic. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
And Rationality rules, you're great. Yeah.
Cheers, man. You too, Stan. You're great.
So, what I wanted to ask about is the value of coming out as an atheist. So, I'll tell you my story. My family has actually kind of been more or less okay with it. It's like, whatever. I mean, for the longest time, like, I just stopped going to church, you know, and I didn't believe, I didn't say anything aloud, but like, when I finally got around to saying, or when they finally got around to asking me, it was just like, okay. I mean, they weren't happy with it, but, you know, it was seeable. But at work, I came out to a friend of mine, so I had known for a few years while we were working there, and I just offhandedly said it was a conversation about religion somehow, and I offhandedly mentioned, you know, I'm an atheist, and like the reaction was immediate and like really unexpected. And he said something like, "So you think my religion is wrong," or something like that, right? And I promise you that none of those words came out of my mouth, right? I just mentioned what I was, and he kind of had this like extreme reaction. He calmed down soon afterwards, and I just explained myself. But like that, like kind of left me shaking, because like he's like one of the most liberal people like I've ever met, you know, and very accepting of all kinds. You know, he's faced discrimination of his own, and so it was just like jarring, right? And then I guess a few months later, another friend that I'd known there for about a year, I guess, at that point, and we had been even closer. We had talking plenty of times, like long conversations, like ignoring work, and just like long conversations, and having fun with this guy. And I didn't know his religious inclination like at all. He never really said anything, so led me to believe that he wasn't especially religious. But apparently, I was completely wrong. So when I finally I mentioned this to him, right? Like he got this look on his face, like he was looking at me in a completely different light, right? And we started this conversation, and we left our office and started walking around the building, right, having this long running conversation, in which he was saying like the worst things, right? He was saying that, like, you know, well, you don't really don't believe, right? Or you're still a good person, like you're not like the others, right? And I said, no, I am definitely an atheist. I'm like all the rest, you know. And it was just a long litany of things that I was not expecting. It was really emotionally taxing. And at the end of it, you know, I told him, like, if like we can never discuss this again. Like we can never talk about this topic again. We're going to be friends, because like we'll have to end our relationship, because this was the worst thing, you know. So and then there was a bit more of a minor point, right? Like I think it must have been around the same time. Actually, it's probably what brought up the conversation in the first place, because he was trying to set me up on a blind date with one of his coworkers in his department. And I guess I mentioned that I wasn't religious, and then apparently she was, and like, and then I said, well, you know, he brought it up, and I said, you know, well, let me meet her anyway. You know, we'll see if he can hit it off. But like, apparently he was kind of embarrassed that he like set up a Christian girl with an atheist, so he like made sure to call the whole thing off. So it was terrible. So I guess my question is that I see that you guys do good work, you know, being out and proud atheists. and spreading the message and all that. But do you guys make judgment calls in your own life as to when, where to come out? Are there people in your life, like maybe at work or some other places where you just decided like this looks like it's going to be a fight and I'm not going to bother, or you guys are you all in?
So I think it's a little bit different for us because we're quite lucky in the UK that atheism isn't really a big deal. That said, I have had a lot of particularly young girls email me and message me saying that they've had issues when they've come out as atheists to their parents or their family or things like that. And so for me, on the whole, I would encourage people when they're old enough and they're able to look after themselves and support themselves to be completely open and honest about their beliefs, because it's nothing to be ashamed of, and everyone should be able to live this I guess their most honest life, if that makes sense. And they should be able to share their beliefs with their friends and the people who they're closest to. And there is a positive in it, especially when it comes to dating, because it might be difficult to date someone with different beliefs to you and stuff like that. However, I do think, especially amongst younger people, telling their family that they're an atheist might not always be the best thing, because it's not always safe for them. And if you can't look after yourself or support yourself, then you need to look out for you and do what's best for you. And I guess with adults, you have to think about the same kind of things, but not necessarily in a you have to rely on other people kind of way, but more in a, if you're in a situation where you think telling them you're an atheist or telling them you're any religion could be dangerous, you have to maybe make that judgment call and not do it. For example, it might not even just be atheism. A Muslim might not want to tell people that they're a Muslim if it's going to get them in trouble or put them in danger. So you have to make that judgment call. And while I don't think it's right to have to hide parts of yourself from your friends, your family, your work colleagues, any part of your life, your safety always comes first, and that's what you have to consider.
It is a difficult balance to get, and I'm sorry to hear about what you suffered, Stan.
It is really
me and Rachel, as she rightfully said, we don't suffer from being atheists. In fact, most people are atheists.
Ever in your personal lives?
No, other than my
besides
nan.
family, right? Besides family, just peers and things like that. Has it ever happened?
The one time anyone's had a problem with it was when I was 17 or 18, and it was a census. My mum was filling us down, and she marks us all down as Church of England. And I was like, oh no, can you just put me as an atheist, please? Because, I want the stats to be accurate. And she was like, oh, but what will people say? I was like, what do you mean, what will people say? And she's like, oh, I don't want them thinking my daughter's an atheist.
Yeah.
And then I actually sat down with her and I was like, what do you mean? What is wrong with this? And we had a big argument. And then in the end we settled it. And now she goes around telling everyone oh, my daughter does YouTube and she talks about this and this and she's fine with it. But for that moment, it was tough.
Yeah.
That,
And that's the closest I've got. And it's not half as bad as what some people have to put up with.
In my experience, people think about things in completely different ways. Like when I first came out to my parents, I was like, okay, I have my arguments ready. I have my talking points ready. Here it goes. And as my mom is just freaking out, just very upset, one of the first things she asked me was, well, are you still going to get married in a church? and I asked her, I was like, what? I didn't catch the first time because that's not even on my mind right now. I'm not even thinking about this kind of stuff, but what matters to other people as far as the social conflicts and stuff that comes up with this kind of thing, sometimes it is a much bigger deal than it is for us, because now I'm living the life. I got a show now. I'm doing this thing.
It's she didn't want to save you.
Yeah.
Her first thoughts were, what's this going to look like in our community if my son isn't getting married in a church?
No, more think of the wedding photos.
Yeah, and and I'm not making fun of my mom for that. I don't.
I
You would be the one to make fun of my mother like that. But I just think it's the priorities are different for other people, and that's the most frustrating thing, because there isn't a strong voice in news outlets and things that are saying oh, we're atheists and we're just like everybody else. Sometimes we're kind of picked on as kind of the others, and there's kind of that us versus them mentality. And God, living in Texas, I'm sure these guys can tell you, you throw a rock around here and you're going to hit a church no matter which direction you throw it. I mean, most of the people here in our country are religious, and we are unfortunately the minority in that. We have to deal with
that is evidently changing.
It is
the process and progress that is being made by people like you, Stan. I think it's important that I stress that, because while you've suffered yourself from these consequences, which are just unjustified and they're unfair, and as you said, it's incredibly emotionally draining. And while I haven't experienced it with atheism, I have certainly experienced it with other topics that I don't have the status quo opinion on. I just want to say that you're making it so that the next time they meet another Stan who is an atheist, it's not going to be as hard for them, and it's deliberate. It's specifically because you've taken some of that off them, and now they have to operate with this idea, okay, there's more than one Stan, there's more than one atheist, and I actually want to be friends with them still, and I really enjoy their company, and perhaps it doesn't need to be as divisive as I've been brought up to think that it must be, and perhaps I don't need to say, I'm calling off this date because he's an atheist. Right. It's really unfortunate, and I'm sorry that you're suffering from it. But let
me clarify: there's only one Stan.
Yeah, there's one Stan, and it's you, Stan. Your Stan.
Damn straight. But I thought. So I mean, I think you guys have been given great advice. To
I was mostly complaining. I don't think I gave actually any advice there, but thank you anyway.
Your presence is enough. It's very comforting.
I'll take it.
But there was a third coworker at work, and I think he must have heard the whole situation. But anyway, I found out later on, he also didn't talk about his religion much, but he was also very religious. Anyway, after I left that particular job, he wanted to hang out, and he was a really good guy. And he took me around his friends, right? And apparently, he's in this a really nice church that has this big community group, and they do baseball, they got their own league and all that, right? And he said, wanted to see if I wanted to join and all that. And I met so much of his friends, and his friends were great people. I really liked them, right? But they're all very much believers. Like every single one of them, very much believer. But they seem to like me, but when the subject did come up, and I just went with, I'm just generally not much of a believer, trying to avoid the A word because that seems to be the trigger, right? I've said non-believer in the past, and that I think people were when they hear that, it doesn't sound like a solid, definite stance, right? So it's I could maybe I'm still finding myself, right? So there's room. So people don't really put much thought into it. Okay, he may not be part of my club, but one day he will find himself. But once you say atheist, it's yeah, this is something different.
You know what I say, Stan? I've gotten into the habit of saying I'm not a Christian. And that's weird because it's I don't say what I am. I just say, I'm not a Christian. I'm separating myself from the majority by doing that and saying I'm kind of in this other category. I've used humanist before, but most people don't know what that is, especially a secular humanist, right? And you're right, the atheist word, that kind of comes up. But I just say I'm not a Christian. Or I say I was a Christian. I'm a former Christian, ex-Christian, whatever you want to call that, And that raises flags in a good way because that tells people a story in a way they might not have considered. Because if you say you're an atheist, well, that could mean a lot of things.
There's a lot of stigma attached to that.
That could be one of these guys where it's religion was either a big or not as big part in their lives, yada, yada. But if I say I'm an ex-Christian, well, that tells a story of, I grew up in the church. Oh, yeah. The worship stuff. Let's go. Yeah, Bible studies, I was there for that. Wrote some of them. But...
It is really interesting with the word atheist because I know that I principally would just say, hey man, I'm an atheist. And whatever backlash came, I'd just go, hey, we can still be friends. You don't need to be nasty about it kind of thing. But I know that the word means different things to different communities. And it's a matter in which way it's best for you to approach it. Yeah. I met one person who said, it was someone from America, and they said, so you're an atheist, right? And I said, yes. And they went, so why do you think communism works? I was like, what? Why is that related? But to them it was. It had a different loaded connotation, if you will.
Isn't that interesting?
Exactly. I've seen this, and that like it could literally mean anything to them. In fact, it could possibly mean devil worshiper to them.
That's right.
So,
and just like what Stephen was saying, you being a good person and you just being like, hey, I'm an atheist and this is what I am, that's changing the narrative.
It is. You're helping destigmatize it for everyone. When people are shocked to hear that you're an atheist, that's you doing something great. That's you changing their minds about things.
Also,
and you should be proud of that.
Agreed. Also, I don't tend to use atheist. I tend to use non-religious. One, because there's a semantic point to be made, and that is that Buddhists are religious and they don't believe in a god, so they're technically atheist. But two, I find non-religious is quite a good way of expressing it, because all you're saying is I don't believe in a religion. There's no non-religious forums or things like that. So it's just, you're basically
Except for the Faithless Forum.
I guess non-religious, it's like, I guess so. It's like, you don't use faith. That's how you get entrance into the forum. You got to go up to the door and use your knowledge to open it.
Get
you
your
can't
faith
use
card.
faith and walk into it. Yeah,
You have to answer a riddle to get in.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a sphinx there. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's all a delicacy, my friend, and I hope that you can find the right balance with what works for you and also works towards making basically the world here, or I should say the United States.
It's the world. It's the world.
And to Dan's point previously, when he was talking about how he's in the South and there's so many churches, I'm deep in the Northeast, the North, which is supposed to be more secular, in case you don't know. And
they tell you.
It's happening here. Yeah. But I really like Dan's idea about, saying like I'm a former Christian or something like that, because it does, like it's a story and invites questions. Maybe they might want to find out more and maybe have their guard down. Like, okay, so he was part of my club, and there's a reason why he left. So maybe I can investigate that. And it's like not in a confrontational manner, because they'll be asking the questions, and it's not like me saying like, "Hey, I'm making a statement," which you might find offensive somehow.
I found it's worked for me. I found people are more willing to ask questions when it's appropriate. But yeah, and that's when I feel like talking to people about it, because sometimes you just don't want to really get into it. But but Stan, great question. Thank you for calling.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
keep being Stan. Stan.
Keep being Stan. You're the only one, Stan.
I think we could all be a little more Stan.
We could be a little more Stan. Let's stand to be a bit more Stan. All right. Take care, Stan. Thanks again.
You guys are all fantastic. You guys are all doing great work, and please don't stop.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah. Stand by me. I don't know. I'm trying to think of puns. Can you stand the puns right now?
I've got this secret relationship with puns where it's not so secret now that I've mentioned it, but I hate them.
Really?
They suck humor out of the room for me, and yet,
he constantly makes them.
There he goes.
No, I do not make them.
Yes, you do.
Lies.
I have lived with you for the last week.
She is so good at lying. It's unreal. No, what it is
do you want to know what your favorite YouTuber is?
No, come on, you stop this business right now. Okay. We'll just finish this. Carry on. Let's go.
Oh my gosh, this is the best.
I was going to say,
I need two co-hosts on here more often. It's so great.
There's 1% of puns that are so good that they bring all the humor back into the room. And so that's where I stand on puns.
Okay.
I'm going to make a video, puns debunked.
Puns debunked. Oh my gosh.
I'm going to make a video response telling you why you're wrong.
Oh no, not
It'll be a whole thing.
It's going to be like Alex O'Connor 2.0.